It's a
It's just
Tuesday night for you. You're like, where am I? What's going on? Let's talk game development. We're here to talk
how
about.
to
Okay, Tim, what are
actually
we
get
talking about?
started.
What's the topic today? Let's start with
We're
that. Baby
we're
steps.
talking about how to get started in game dev. How to actually get started, because a lot of people are like, "Oh, how to get started?" And you like go in Unity and you do this stuff, but like, let's be real here. Getting started is super complicated. Sometimes it seems like you need all this motivation, you need all this technical skill, you need all this knowledge, you need all this stuff, and sometimes it's complicated to get started. So we're talking about how to actually get started in game
Oh,
dev.
I see what you did there. You had trouble getting started with our conversation today, just because
Yeah,
sometimes in life we have trouble getting started, and you need to have you need to psych yourself up for it and get
exactly.
ready.
That I
So
did that on purpose. It
so
was
we've got a
perfect.
topic which is how to get started in game development. What does that even mean? I was asking you 2 minutes ago in terms of Tim, what are we talking about? What does it even mean to get started? Do you mean how do you go from zero to something? Do you mean how to launch your first game? Do you mean how to get a job? Do you mean how to go from being just kind of terrible to being amazing? What do we mean by this topic?
So I think we can actually tailor it to everybody that's in the chat right now. So we put a poll link in chat. If you're watching us live, if you could go ahead and click on that and fill out the poll of kind of where you're at in your game dev journey, because I think once we know that, we can kind of help people wherever they're at in their game dev journey, if they've started, if they haven't started, if they're at a project, if they've done a game jam, wherever they're at. So click on that straw poll link. I'll post it one more time and tell us where you're at. But I think getting started is one of those things that, yeah, it does have a lot of meanings, like you were saying, Rick. Like, oh, I've already written a line of code, therefore I've started, or like I've already launched a game on Steam, therefore I've started. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So if we've got a good understanding, kind of where everybody's at, if you want to share my screen real quick,
Yep.
we've got the votes coming in. Looks like most people have finished smaller projects or game jams, or they've watched videos or taken courses, but they don't have a personal project. Oh, look at this live data incoming. We're fancy.
Crazy. Look at you with the technology, huh?
I
Genius.
know I can't get the intro right, but I got the technology right.
Dude, you not maybe not be a talker, but you be a doer. That's just as good in life.
You know how I be.
You be good. You be you.
Yeah, so it looks like the majority of people have watched videos or taken courses, but they don't have a personal project. So I think for getting started in game dev, for what a lot of the specific people that are watching today, means getting started with their first actual game outside of courses or outside of YouTube. Um, and
Sorry,
then
I
a
pushed the
bigger
wrong
chunk.
button. I turned you off. We're so professional here this morning.
So another big chunk of that too is probably people that have done smaller stuff, right? Started on a bunch of projects, probably have shiny object syndrome, probably have done game jams and stuff, but they've never actually finished and released something too. So we've got that's like 60% of the people listening here, and we've got a few people that have finished smaller projects or game jams, which go you guys. We should note, since it's kind of relevant right now, it's not really us tooting our own horn here, but the GameDev.tv Game Jam is coming up May 20th, and it's May 20th through the 30th. It's 2 weekends long, plus a whole week in between, and it's got all kinds of stuff. And there's a free Game Jam starter kit if you guys want to go ahead and grab that on there as well. But also, you get a free course if you submit a game. So the people that haven't finished, if you've always been like, oh, there's no reason for me to finish, well, now there is, because you actually get a free course when you finish and you submit. But yeah,
And you know,
so
a lot of getting started, I think, is just having the courage to be bad. And I'm teaching my kids at the moment how to create things in Scratch, and I'm working on a Scratch course as well. So if any of you have kids or people who are new to programming, for me, to be perfectly honest, this is a bit of a secret here, Tim, but I've got into Scratch, and if you don't know, Scratch is a web-based drag and drop block visual scripting language, and a lot of it, when I was first looking at it, I didn't know what to do, even though I understood the fundamental concepts, like, what a loop is and what an if statement is and variables. I understood those concepts, but just to get there and think off the top of your head, okay, I want something to happen over and over. And then when you bump into something, I want it to stop and play a sound effect. Even though I've created that in Unity or in Unreal, I understand the mechanisms of it. There's still that process of saying, but I need to do this on my own without going and looking up a tutorial, without going to the help document, or without copying something I've done before. And I think it's that stage of transitioning from now I have to do it on my own that's really difficult. And this is why I've really enjoyed Scratch, because the concepts are very simple. Once you understand the loop, once you've got it, and then you can use it in a lot of places. And so one thing I'd say, if you're starting out, this rant is leading somewhere, by the way, if you're starting out, is go find some really, really simple things and learn them by doing them over and over and get really good at those. So you've now got them in your toolkit as I can do that. So for example, I'm always going on about collision, like collision, have something bump into something, have something trigger something, have something when they collide, a thing happens, because so many aspects, so many game mechanics are born from that concept of collision. So if you know how to do that, whether it's Unity or Unreal or Scratch or Godot or Godot. See, people seem to be calling it Godot lately, but anyway, whatever engine it's in, once you master that concept, you know it, and hopefully you'll know it forever. And then you can start thinking, okay, I'm making a game. How do I do this? It's a little bit scary. I don't know what's going on. Okay, I know how to do collision. I know how to do player movement. I know how to do for example, having some sort of variable so that I have a score and I have a timer. Okay, just with those four things that I mentioned there, you can make so many games and have them so interesting and so much fun. So build upon it little bit by little bit, and don't do what a lot of beginners do, which is look at it and say, okay, a couple of things I know, but wow, look at all these things I have no idea about. Like, there's always gonna be things you don't have any idea about. So don't focus on that. Focus on what you know and make a game that fits within what you know. And as Tim mentioned, we've got a game jam coming up. Take that same philosophy into that. Write down what you know, make a game just with what you know, and that game's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun because you've executed it well with what you know. And then keep adding more things to what you know over time.
Yeah. And just to back that up too, I think that's a big part of how I learned art as well, is I started with drawing a couple characters, and then I was like, okay, you know what? I want to draw like 30, 40 different animals. And I just did that one after the other. I just drew animals. But then I started to realize that all these animals have different pieces to them. Really, if I really wanted to do this, I'd make the same animal multiple times over and over and over again. I'd be like, oh, this one's sad, this one's angry, this one's happy, whatever. And I just started going over and doing that. And that was where the real learning took place, is doing that same thing over and over again. Because then I started to find shortcuts and easier ways to make curves and like what eyeballs look good, and like, all the different little subtle pieces to it that I never thought were possible, but it only came about by doing the same thing over and over again. So starting with the things that you've already learned, although it seems boring, like I've already done that, I want to learn new things, I want to go try new things, right? It sometimes it can be discouraging because the thing you think is gonna take 20 minutes takes 6 hours, and especially in a game jam with a time limit, that's where people don't end up finishing, right? Because they wanted to make this cool game, that feature that was supposed to take 20 minutes didn't, and now they're behind on everything else. And there's plenty of other features in there that are going to take way longer than you think they will. So I think that's really good advice with starting what you know and kind of sticking to those constraints. But I also think it's the whole course philosophy is super amazing, but it takes practice to kind of retain that knowledge too. Like if you just go through a course and then you wait 6 months, it's going to be really hard to just recreate what you've already done, even though you've already done it. Like you're going to forget where the buttons are, you're going to forget the different settings, you're going to forget a bunch of random little things. So the repetitiveness is important. And it's funny because we were talking about Blender the other day, Rick, and I used Blender thousands of hours when I was like 15. Like it just came out and it was new, and it was it was the only thing available like in the game dev space that was like free. So I was using it nonstop. And I downloaded Blender a while back, just recently, and I had I forgot almost everything it was with Blender, but my hands remembered the shortcuts for the specific things because I had done so much repetition on like tab to go into edit mode, click on the vertices, G to grab, like all the stuff that I had done 1,000 times, I had retained, even though I knew nothing about the interface of what I was looking at. So that practice actually is something that your body will retain it, just your body and your mind, the more you do something. So that's
Yeah.
super, super important because that's where a lot of people get lost.
Yeah, gotcha. Um, There's a question here in our chat about, let me just find the question about the whole how to learn. So people ask us all the time, should I take a course and stick with it and go the whole way through it? Should I go to university? Should I go to school? Do I need a degree? There's all these questions running around about how to learn. And I think how to learn, the place you learn from doesn't really matter so long as you trust the person who's teaching you, that they're teaching you good practices. So whether it's going to a school, whether it's online, whether it's free online, whether it's a paid course, if you're progressing and you like the person, and the person you're working with, the person who's teaching you, motivates you to continue going, that's the best sort of knowledge to get, when someone is also motivating you. The reason you might want to go to a formal school, so to go somewhere in person, or maybe it's now it's all online, but once COVID ends, hopefully if COVID ends, you can go there in person. um, that's good if you need that kind of consistency, you need the structure, you need the discipline, you need someone else to say, okay, if you don't hand in the assignment, you fail and you get kicked out. So that's good if you need that in your life. If you don't need that, if you're on top of that, then I think online learning through courses is amazing. And the question of, should you, when you start a course, should you just do the course and see it the whole way through, is entirely up to you. And once again, use the, well, obviously that's not a very useful answer. It's up to you. Do whatever you want. Thanks very much, Rick. That's completely useless. But what I'm saying by that is, if you're continuing to get better, then it matters not the path you take. So our courses, we have courses that are, for example, 20 or 30 hours of teaching material in it. You could start that and just go the whole way through and not deviate at all. Just do the course. It'll be great. You can go in that, get 2 sections into it and say, and I think this is important, say, it's now starting to get more complicated. I don't think I've really cemented those fundamental things. I'm going to go do another course that goes through the beginner things, go through that again, and do the same stuff. And this is often what I need to do. I'll see it once. It's not in there yet. I can't rely upon that. I have to go do the same thing over and over and over. And now I get it. Now I can have that and rely upon that. And then I can go to the next advanced stage of whatever it is that I'm working on. There's also, I think, a very good approach when you're taking a course, that if you work through something, particularly our courses, you work through a course, a section, maybe you're making a game where you're flying and shooting, then what you should do, I think, should's a bad word, but what is very useful to do is to take a little bit of time, maybe 10% of the time that it took you to do the whole thing. If the whole thing took you 2 weeks, then take a day or two to modify that game, to make it your own, to do it in a way which is not exactly like the thing that you've just gone and copied, to show that you understand what's going on. You might say, okay, instead of flying fast, I'm going to fly slow and do spins. Oh, how do I do a spin? Need to go research that, dig deep and figure it out. Don't just copy paste. Don't just follow along. Don't just do exactly what these video training courses or YouTube videos are doing. Modify it a little bit, and then you're going to get a lot of extra growth and development out of doing things that way. So that's a broad introduction to how to learn. Knowledge is only useful if you do something with it. So don't just be accumulating knowledge, accumulate the ability to make, the ability to create.
Right. And I think the ability to do on your own without somebody there is important too. So, like, one of the things I did when I took the Unity courses was I went through the little text wizard game with the beautiful Rick in a wizard hat imagery.
A wizard
And
hat.
yeah, you're in a wizard hat.
Oh,
Or maybe it
wizard
was
hat.
Ben. I'm confusing you two. Sorry.
Sure.
Uh, so I went through the different course, and then immediately once I finished that course, I started a new project and I tried to recreate that project just from memory, and I failed. And every once in a while, I need help. Oh, I need this help with this little part. I'd go back to the course, and then I did it a third time as well. And the third time, I was able to get all the way through from memory. And it kind of tested my skill. And that's, a lot of people don't like tests in school, but that's kind of what the idea behind tests is. Like, you did the knowledge, now let's test to make sure you have the knowledge still outside of the classroom space. And so I think that that part's really important. Obviously, that gets more and more complex the more complex the projects are. That was a super easy, like, 2D thing. But I found that I have to be able to recreate it on my own. Otherwise, the information is not being retained, especially watching Rick on 1.5 or 2x speed. It's just, You're doing it, but like, are you retaining it?
Yeah. I'm impatient now. I can't watch any YouTube video, anything at all. I can't watch it less than 1.5. It's always two speed, like going really quick. Um, and it does ruin I even watch Netflix, Tim. If I watch Netflix, do you know you can speed Netflix up? If it's
You speed
like a
up
comedy or a
Netflix.
light sort of show, I'm just needing a break for half an hour. I'm like, well, time is money. I don't have half an hour. Let's watch this in 20 minutes. So I watch shows
Wow.
sped up. I know, not shows that I really love. Shows I really love. Just finished watching
You'll
Ozark
slow
last
those
night.
down.
What a show! Loved it. Amazing. Just gripping the
You
whole
say
way through.
Ozark?
Ozark. Have you watched
Yeah, I
Ozark?
haven't seen the last season yet. I
Oh,
need
dude,
to.
so good. The fact at the end when I'll tell you what happens, so you'll love it. Nah,
Stop.
okay, stop. Don't do
That
that.
show that show is fantastic
You gotta watch
so
it
far.
before someone spoils it for you. But it's
Yeah.
there's this. Sorry, okay, this is not to do with game development, but I think there's a way to do things because the fans want it. There's a way to do things because you think it'll be awesome. Ozark, just all the characters, just I don't know. Anyone else watch Game of Thrones? I'm just season finales, like when an entire series wraps up, I'm just sitting there nervous. I'm like, how are you guys going to mess this up? How are you going to not give us the right kind of character arcs or take the bad decisions or whatever? Game of Thrones, like so sad. Just it was like breaking up with a longtime partner. How awful that was. But Ozark, it was wonderful, really good. So anywho, um, so that's my thoughts on game development. Just Ozark.
Well, all these people watching us live can't speed us up though, so sucks
Well,
for you
that's true.
guys.
So I really appreciate you folks who are here watching us live. It must be painful as hell. It's just I honestly try to speak faster when we're doing these things, just so people who are watching live can watch us in a little bit of 1.5 speed as we're doing it in real time.
I always sound like I'm half asleep, so
Yeah.
like
Well,
low
you and I
and
do have
chill.
meetings a lot when it's 2 a.m. for you. So one day I'm
Maybe
gonna
your
talk
face
to
is
you.
just like trigger to my brain to be tired.
Thanks. You're rocking yourself to bed at night. Oh my god, Rick's face, 1.5, can't do it anymore.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
So
anyway, getting
as
started in
always,
game dev.
if you guys watching live have questions, there's the reward for you. Watching us at slow speed, you get to ask questions. Let us know what questions you've got. I'll answer them as best we can. Um, there's also the how to get into game dev. Tim, you've created and launched your own solo indie games. What was the process for you to go from, I kind of like doing game jammy kind of games, to I'm going to make a proper full on game? I'm going to make a game and launch a game. Was there any sort of magic course that you went through? Any sort of, you contacted the government and got a certificate of I'm about to start my game? What was the process for you? That was a joke,
I
by the way. I see your sleepy face
did
responded
it.
to like, what this
I
guy
did
talking
the
about?
slowest half, the worst way possible. Is I just like slogged through it the whole time. I will say, so Philophobia, my first game, was the journey of me learning game dev. That's one of the reasons why it took kind of 4 years to make, is because I was learning game dev as it, and I actually did like 20 some game jams during that 4 years. So I built a lot of skills, and I would actually take game jams specifically as a challenge to kind of learn or do a new thing that I hadn't quite done yet. That I could then implement in one of my games too. But then it's interesting because Battle Barn, well, Murder Bunnies is in there too, but that's a physical card game. But then Battle Barn is my next game. That's probably, we're looking at probably in August, launch date 2022. And that was a game jam game. It was a game jam called Barn Battles, and now it's Battle Barn Tactics. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. I think you've got to have the motivation to get stuff out there and to actually finish it. Like you've got to have that drive. I think that's important, because if you just kind of want to mess around with, like, some people like to sandbox stuff, right? Like that's why games like Factorio or RimWorld, they just like a sandbox to mess around with. And if that's all you want, like, the game engines are fine. You don't ever have to release anything, but you've got to have some kind of drive or something pushing you forward. For me, I had always wanted to release a game my entire life, so that was a big part of it. And I got discouraged so many times along the road. There were periods of 3 or 6 months in Philophobia where I didn't work on it. Battleborn, same thing. I'm just recently getting into working on it again after 6 months off of it. So that stuff happens. Like, life happens, but you have to be dedicated to the idea of finishing the thing. I think that's important. And that'll get you started where other people would have quit permanently, right? Like just that dedication to the idea of finishing. But yeah, game jams are a great way to kind of start a commercial project because you can kind of build the whole base of the thing in a weekend or a week or whatever, and then if people like it, you can add on to it as well.
I think the best part of a game jam is getting all the like being bad, like failing. That's the really important part. I started my rant before talking about Scratch and teaching my kids and stuff. And what I'm trying to show them is you have to make a bad thing that's not good and not fun. There's no other path. Like there's no other
Right.
path. It's I don't know which famous philosopher or clever person said this. It wasn't me originally, but you have to be bad before you're good. You have to be crappy at something before you're amazing at something. There's no other path to go through. You don't instantly hop on a bicycle and start doing tricks on it. It's impossible. It doesn't work that way. So that's why I love game jams because you can get there, make the mistakes, do bad things, do things that don't work, um, do things that you think this is going to be amazing, and then no one likes it, and it's safe because that's what's expected of this format. It's expected that you're going to experiment, try things out, and if it's no good, I don't know, maybe no one looks at it. That's fine, but eventually, after you do that a number of times, you will get to the point where you do things that people really enjoy and like. Tim, you got something queued up? Do you want me to share?
Yeah. So go ahead and share this. So this is along what you're saying, Rick, of like you got to be bad to be better. So this is Space Goats 2, right? So this is the game jam I made for a Ludum Dare game, and this game I'm not going to be able to. Can you hear my audio?
On Space Goats, I can't. I can see
Okay,
you
good.
bouncing every time I'm trying to look at what you've got on your screen there. I do see you skipping away from it. There we go. There's a goat
Space
with
Goats
a
2.
helmet on. Oh,
Yeah.
just want to watch that image. Anyway,
Oh, the GIF.
yeah.
Yeah, so this is a game about space goats where an interdimensional space count is chasing the space goat, but the
Dude, it
space goat
looks
has to
fun. It
poop
looks awesome.
cupcakes.
Like visually,
Here's the
like
thing, it's cool, it's interesting, but this game is actually very boring.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
there's a
And
whole
that's
cutscene.
a
I'm
good
not
thing
gonna
as
go into
well
it.
when you're starting out. Like I talk about moments all the time. Make a moment. If you can make a moment that is 30 seconds of awesome, you can be a professional game developer
Right.
because you've made 30 seconds of awesome. Just do another 30 seconds and another
Yeah.
30 seconds and then another minute, another 2 minutes. So you've got it. You've got the ability to do it and strive for that first. And looking at it here, that looks really fun. It's like there's some big whale thing chasing a goat thing and you're running along and you're going to chomp on it. I'm sure that's like, wow, this is cool. And then after you do the same chomp and the same click over and over, that's why you're saying it gets a bit boring after a
Yeah.
while. But then you
Well,
say,
what
okay, what other controls can I do? Can I do a block? Can I do a jump?
you
Can I
can
do a dodge? I
defecate.
need different enemies. And you
You
can't
can
do that in a weekend.
So, but this is an example. So this is a game where I had never worked on story and narrative stuff before. And so I said, I want to make a game that has the craziest, most ridiculous lore ever. And I came up with Space Goats. And the basic intro of the game is that an interdimensional space clown gets really mad that space goats are getting more attention than him. So he's trying to kill and eat all the space goats. But the space goats have to run. And the only thing that slows down the interdimensional clown is cupcakes. So the space goats can actually eat things and then poop out cupcakes to slow him down, which makes total sense. But so I put all the time into the narrative and the effort and the music and the controls and all that stuff. And then the gameplay is just really, really boring. But it did really well in Ludum Dare in like audio and humor, right? Obviously, because those you can clearly tell where I put the effort, right? Like it shows in the ratings versus like 432nd or 729th versus 32nd and 34th. And then I put so much like work into the narrative, even though it sounds like absolutely crazy, that Space Goats actually became the core for a lot of my future games. And Battleborn Tactics actually takes place in the Space Goats universe. Murder Bunnies takes place in the Space Goats universe. They're all in Battleborn Tactics as well. So this is a game I made some years ago in a weekend that meant nothing, that I put a whole lot of effort into the story and stuff like that, and then it ended up being this crazy thing that ended up actually having a big effect on stuff. But it had to start from like I had to take all the pressure away, right? Because
Yep.
one of the reasons I did this too was I was working on Fathophobia, which is a very serious game about like depression and like breakups and like all kinds of dark themes. And I took everything that I did so seriously. So for this, for me, was actually kind of terrifying to
Mm,
put out a game that was just so stupid. You know what I mean? Like just
yeah.
put out something that was absolutely just dumb.
Yeah.
Even though it represented part of my personality, because like I do a lot of dumb shit, and like I'm very like I'm very like humorous in a lot of the things that I do. So like it represented part of my personality, but I was scared to kind of show that part of my
Yeah.
personality. So it really helped to be able to be willing to fail for me to actually do this stuff. Like I was like, I'm gonna make this game so dumb that nobody is gonna like everybody's gonna think this is dumb.
Yeah.
And it actually worked out in a lot of
And
different ways. So
And you know what? There's a little bit of game jams are tricky as well because if you're not an artist, you're not supposed to use asset packs that you've purchased or asset packs that you, pardon me, you can't distribute because our game jam, we want you to be able to upload your code so people can see it and have a look at it, and you've got to be careful with distribution rights, etc. But if you get there and just sort of scratch out some stuff, do a little bit of illustration or um, y- you know a way of using stock assets that you are allowed to spread around or assets from the engine, whatever, and just modifying them slightly, just giving them a little bit of a tweak, just a paint over. Uh, then you can get some of that. It can be more visually interesting. So I think when you're working on a game, just getting basic assets from wherever. I love asset packs. Get in some basic assets and then just do something like put a post processing thing over it. And you're like, oh, I don't know how to do post processing. Give it a Google and spend an hour and then tweak
right.
around some colors, a little bit of bloom and lens flare or whatever it is that your engine affords you to do. And then you can have it look a bit more interesting and unusual. Change the lighting. If you're in Unity or Unreal, just make it a bit darker and put a couple of lights in your scene. They're things that everyone can do. And then it gives it a bit of an atmosphere. But what I wanted to be really super clear on when it comes to starting to make games, I'm going to share something just playing around in Scratch. And if you don't know Scratch, and I said before, I'm working on a Scratch course, so this is top of mind for me at the moment. Scratch is so easy. If you've not seen it before, you just go to scratch.mit.edu. It's super, super easy. And you might look at it and say, well, there's a lot of stuff going on. These are really simple concepts that my 10-year-old understands after explaining them for half an hour. So like if she can get it quickly, then anyone can get it quickly. Because I think a lot of people are intimidated by, oh, I'm never going to be able to do it, but you absolutely can. This is a game where all you do, left, right, up, down, you catch the ball. And for me, it's like, oh, it's kind of fun. It's very therapeutic. Someone else is going to look at that and be like, this is stupid. I'm like, cool, it doesn't matter. This is a game. I made a game, and now what I can do is look at it and say, all I need to do is a timer and a score, and I've got an actual, honest to goodness game in 20 seconds. Get the ball as many times as you can. That's literally a game. And if you look at the biggest AAA games, there's a lot of games where they're saying, okay, go kill as many monsters as you can in 3 minutes, or you've got a time limit to get to the end of the level. That's a really important mechanic, which is a do a thing in a certain amount of time, get a score. So you could submit this to a game jam. It'd be totally valid. It's a game. Now, it's not going to be a game you can sell and make a bunch of money out of. That's fine. It's a starting point. So this, now I know Scratch a little bit. I could literally make this game in, I don't know, 7 minutes so quickly. I could add a few extra mechanics in another 10 minutes. I could get in there and say, I'm just going to change the main character, from red to whatever. I'm going to change him to I don't know, green. Oh, that's not the button. I'm going to change it to green in, no, well, there we go. I don't know. He's got a green thing on. Maybe you pick up the ball and he changes his outfit or his costume. He's currently cycling through the different colors and then boom, he gets the green one. So there's so much that you can do just in really simple programs. You can do a similar kind of simple thing in Unity as well. But the reason I'm showing you Scratch is anyone can do it. My kids can use Scratch. Tim, I know you're a big Construct 3 fan. It's a similar kind of philosophy. You get in there, you can be productive and successful quickly. Unreal Blueprint, I love it in terms of the draggy and droppy nature. There's a little bit more complexity for Blueprint, but it's still a visual scripting language. Bolt in Unity. So if you're intimidated by programming, you can still get in there and start making games. You don't have to say, I'm going to start by learning C++, then I'm going to make a game. You can make games quickly. And don't uh, don't fool yourself into thinking that it's only a game if it's amazing. It's a game if someone can play it, have some sort of challenge, and win or lose. That's a game. And Oh, goodness me. There's so many games out there that started off as simple little hokey games that made people tons of money. One of my favorites, I'm not going to say Flappy Bird, but well, I am. Flappy Bird, simple. You can make that in Scratch in a couple of hours. But Crossy Road, everything's that same naming formula, isn't it? Crossy Road. It's a simple game. I think the dudes made it. I met with them and asked them. I think it was 5 weeks or something. They made it pretty quickly, and it did super super well. So it doesn't have to be. You don't have to take on this huge, massive. The RPG I've always wanted to make my entire life to be successful.
On that, we probably should talk about scope a little bit because I think that's a big part of not only starting but also finishing, right? So a lot of people, they don't know how to properly gauge scope, and because of that, they start projects that are way too large, and then they get overwhelmed and then they quit, right? But just like you showed, like even the basic projects that I think a lot of people had in mind would be a higher scope than what you just showed, right? Than like a dinosaur just grabbing a ball over and over.
Yep.
They'd be, oh well, I'm not gonna do my MMO, so I'm just gonna do like a basic RPG for right now, like a super small one. Like it'll be
Mhm.
fine. But even that, like there's just the inventory system like alone, right? Is like a lot of work that especially newbies might not have the skills to make in a game jam setting or something like that. So scope is one of those things that you'll kind of learn with experience, but generally like I even for me, who's been making games for years, I still, whenever I'm thinking about scope for a game jam game, I'm like, I always ask myself, like, what is the smallest possible thing that I can do? And then when I get that idea, I ask myself, what is a step below that? Because I even know that that basic idea is too complex. So like, what is the simplest thing? And if I have 10 days for a game jam, like I do, I say, okay, what can I do in 6 hours or a day? Right? What game can I make in a day? And that one day game will take me 10 days, trust me, with polish and
Yep.
menus and all that stuff, right? So yeah, it's super important. Like it when I do a weekend game jam that starts on Friday and ends on Monday, for example, I have to have a playable build by Friday or Saturday morning. Otherwise,
Yep.
it's too big. So
Yeah.
that's
So
important to keep in mind.
so much of it, like just my little dinosaur game. Um, it's basic, but often you don't need more than that with your game mechanics, with the coding part of what you're doing. And if you watch any of my courses, at some point I'm going to say solve it through tuning, not through more coding. And what I mean by that, or I might say through, not through more mechanics. What I mean by that is, let me share it again. All I've got now, the mechanics in here, movement is just left, right, up, down. That's it. Left, right, up, down, and grab the ball and touch the ball. So that's pretty simple. How can I make movement more interesting? Maybe we have some sort of friction, so you slide and you're drifting. So when I start to move, I don't stop. I kind of keep going. So it's this kind of you're running on ice kind of feeling to it. And like, oh, the running on ice might be more interesting. How can I do that? And then you get into your code and you add some variation to that base code of what you've got to make movement more interesting. And then what can I have happen when I collide with the ball? Let's get some explosions going on. Maybe the screen goes black. Maybe the character spins around. The controls are opposite. Maybe it switches from keyboard to mouse. Oh, that's weird. Maybe instead of getting one, that now there's two. Maybe the balls are multiplying on the screen. So within that basic framework of what am I trying to do, you can add more polish, you can add more creativity, you can add more visuals, you can tune it. Maybe it's going pretty slow at the moment. What if it went move lightning speed? And if you touch the edge of the screen, then it's game over. What if we have some obstacles in there? So you're moving really quick and it's like so difficult to move and not bump into things. So you can start with this really basic framework of here's a mechanic and here's a thing I'm trying to do, and then do a whole bunch of what ifs. See if you've got the programming skills to implement the what if, and then throw it in there, and then add, tune it. So is it faster, slower, bigger, smaller? So it feels good, and then give yourself tons and tons of time to make it visually appealing. To put in some audio as well, to do it so there's whatever particle effects depending upon the engine that you're working in, so that you get it and it feels legitimate, and you'd be amazed the difference it makes when you go from a game that hasn't had that art pass into it. That's the exact same game where you're going. put in some nicer graphics
Right.
and do some particles and change the lighting a little bit. You show people the two. The first one, they're like, that's all right. You show people the second one, like, wow, this is amazing. It has such a huge impact to add that level of polish onto it. I know a lot of us start out being gameplay programmers, gameplay designers, gameplay creators. That's what game development is. I want to, indie game development. I want to make the game. I'm going to learn the programming. I learn the engine. And then at some point you realize, oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of aesthetics I need to understand as well. You can team up with someone who's the art person, or more likely you do it yourself. So you need to be ready for that when you're getting into game development, that it's not all about programming and coding. It's also about aesthetics and understanding, how do I make this thing look good, because they're
Yeah.
called video games, they're not called audio games.
Good one.
Yeah, see that?
I just
That
linked
was
something
made
in
that
the
up just
chat
then.
for the Jonas Tyroller. Can we make this button fun to press video, which is fantastic. But it's along those same lines. Like, you start with a basic button and it's just stupid. It just doesn't
Can
do
you
anything.
can
And
you
then,
cue that up on your screen? Is that something you're doing?
yeah.
Oh, it's a
And then,
video, is
so
it? Okay.
it's the YouTube
Oh,
video
you can,
thing.
yeah, quickly show us.
Uh,
Looking at your
yeah, but
sharing
I have
screen, we see
ads.
you
I
and
have
I, but
ads. So hold on. Let me get through
okay,
the
this
YouTube ads.
YouTube ads, premium, man. Although I did, someone in the chat was before saying, can you stream this to somewhere where we can minimize without it being blocked? I've got YouTube Premium because years and years and years of watching ads, I'm like, oh, I can't stand the ads anymore. You win, YouTube. So I love it. Love not having the ads. But maybe we could stream this as well to Twitch at the same time, so people have some options.
Yeah, I think we can do that. So starts off with a basic button. And by the way, anybody that hasn't seen Jonas's channel, I highly recommend you check it out. So um, this button just kind of goes through a lot of iterations until it's just crazy, and it's just talks about all kinds of interesting stuff, and it goes through the idea of kind of how it's interesting and all that stuff. And at the end, you end up with some really cool, epic, crazy buttonness. So it's, and look at that, it's us live right now. Awesome. But yeah, I think spending little time on the game, but a lot of time on the polish is super, super important. That's kind of
Yep.
the idea behind that, right? And like, I think a lot of there was a question in the chat. I think Avocado Fire asked, yeah, what should we plan before we start, and where should we start a big game? I think you start a big game with a small game. Like, I really believe that. I think obviously I love game jams, and we're doing a game jam, so we're a little bit biased on that. But if you've ever got an idea for a larger game that you want to make, you should always ask yourself, what is the game jam version of this, and try to make that in a weekend or a week, or less than 2 weeks. Because if you can't get that game out in under a week or two, you're not going to be able to get that game out in under a year or two, if that makes sense. Because you'll make the basic version of it, and then you've got to add all the content, you've got to add all of the art, you've got to add all the animations, you've got to add all the sound, you've got to add menus, and not only that, but there's a lot of people forget about iteration time too. So the first time you implement something, you may have to re-implement it like 2 or 3 times in a different way, to make sure that it looks and feels good, to make sure that it works good, to make sure it's easy and understandable. You're going to give the game to someone for feedback once, and they're not going to understand it at all. And it's going to be super discouraging, because you're like, this was the best game ever. And then they'll be like, but I don't know what to do though. And then, you're going to have to rework some of the stuff. So I think the best way to start a big game is to start by making a small game and adding on to it. And exactly like you were recommending, Rick.
Yep. Yeah. Let's see if we can catch some of these questions in here, Tim. We getting so much good ammunition from folks with questions. Give us a second. Are you going to have a? Oh, okay. Are you going to have a game jam tips live stream before the game jam? Yes, and
Fun
maybe even
fact.
some guest
Yeah,
people
we
talking
might
about
have
this
something
stuff.
special for you next week.
Nice, next week. Okay, what else we got here? You've read that one already.
Philip says you can make a game of any size. Just make sure to make the small things first, and don't design it as a game on its own, but more as a modular piece, and then later implement them in your main game. One of the things I will say about that, I definitely agree with that strategy if you know what you're doing, but that's actually a trap I think a lot of beginners get stuck on is they try to make everything super modular and super amazing and super like elegant and over optimizing early where you don't need to is kind of like using like a giant like machine like construction grade machine to like dig a little hole in your backyard when you could have used a shovel, if that makes sense. Like it's kind of overkill, and the time and effort it takes to get that machinery and all that sometimes can just be enough to make you want to quit. So be careful about over optimizing early, or putting a lot of effort into modularization of stuff that might be inefficient or ineffective. Because that's the other thing too, right? It's like I said, iteration time. So if you implement something completely modularly for a certain way to do a UI, and then you decide that that UI is bad, like you spend a lot of time making it modular, right? I'm a big fan of like doing things quick and dirty until you like it, and then refactoring it. For me, even though you know that you're going to do it twice, right? Because you have to do it bad and then do it good. It actually saves you time because you might end up doing it good 3 or 4 times, and you might end up doing it bad a few more times, right? So if that makes any sense, I think beginners get caught in the over optimization trap, especially programmery beginners. I
Yeah.
think quite a bit.
Oh yeah. I mean, you and I, we've talked about this a lot. You and I are indie game developers. You and I are not programmers or computer science graduates or coders. Like that's not how we identify. So for me, if I've got something where the player says, "Wow, that was great," I don't care if a proper programmer comes along, has a look at it, and is like, "Oh, wow, what the hell have you done here?" I'm like, "Who cares?" So that's my philosophy. Now, you don't want to have that philosophy to the extreme because then you yourself are going to come back to your code. It might not even be 3 months later. It might be a week later. You look at it and you're like, what on earth have I done here? So you need to have something that works for you, that's readable to you, and also something that has um, flexibility uh, without too much extra refactoring. So you don't want to build in flexibility. And if you're new, you might be like, I don't know what any of this stuff means. I haven't hit this problem yet. I haven't encountered this. Um, so my advice there is just do it however it works for what you want to do right now, and then rebuild it if you need to rebuild it if something new comes along. So,
Sometimes you
again,
don't.
what's that? Sorry.
You don't need to, right? Sometimes you don't need to rebuild it. You thought you did. You thought it
More
had to
often
be
than not, you don't.
perfect. But
Yeah.
you know what? That ball of duct tape in the corner, you ship the game with it and it works.
Exactly, exactly. And you might yes, I think personally, and there's going to be some people on professional game teams where there's a team. Okay, so let me just back up here. When I was working on teams of 100 people, you absolutely cannot have that philosophy.
Right.
Because if you're like blah 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 blah, yeah, it works, and then someone else needs to hook into your code, and they're like, "Dude, I've got no idea, and this doesn't work, and where is the thing, and why are you twisting it that way when I'm tweaking it that way?" So the larger the team, the more you've got to really pay attention to it,
Absolutely.
plan properly, go more slowly, etc. The smaller the team, the more you can just be rapid, be agile with how you go about doing it. And like I was showing you before, again with my little run around and the dinosaur grabbing the ball game, just chuck it in there and see what it goes like. And then okay, instead of a ball, you're chasing an enemy. Oh, the enemy's going to run away. Oh, now to this. Oh, but my player controls aren't set up right, so I need to change those. Oh, instead of being a keyboard, I want it to be a mouse. So you've got to be fast. You've got to be willing to throw things away. You've got to be willing to rip it out, put a new thing in.
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot be. But I spent 2 days making this animation and it's beautiful. And this character has to be in the game no matter what because I took the time to do it. You can't do it that way. First of all, don't go and spend 2 days on something that might possibly not end up in the game. That's really important. And the other thing is just you've got to put it to the side and say, what's the better experience? I know I feel really clever that I implemented this amazing procedural music system, but players hate it. So, sorry, you're gone, procedural music system.
Yeah. There's
Thanks,
a there's a idea in startups called minimum viable product, right? And we use it a lot for games.
Hmm.
But I think a lot of people they think that minimum viable product is a version of kind of this stuff, right? So I'm going to build a wheel, then I'm going to build two wheels, and then I'm going to build part of the car, and then I'm going to build the driving. But in reality, I think it's more like this, right? Like you start
Mm.
with a playable version of a skateboard, and then you add something else to it, a playable version of a scooter, then a playable version of a bike, then a playable version of a motorcycle, and so on and so forth. And I think having it playable every stage of the way is important,
Super
right? And
important.
so right now, this is your little ball game, Rick, right? Like where you collect balls, like
Yep.
and I think it's you can add a bunch of stuff to it, but you keeping it playable along the way versus starting with something that's completely not playable and then saying, "Oh, it's going to be playable eventually. It's going to be super interesting. It's going to be great. Like it's going to have more like, you know what I mean? But you can't play it. And so you might get to here and say, "Oh, you know what? This game is not what I thought it would be." And you might get really discouraged or people might not like it or, you could have made a
Yeah.
mistake right here that you can't tell that you made until way over here. So keeping this in mind, I think is super important.
Yeah, I agree. And what you're saying, the equivalent of my little hokey game over here that I've been working on is I've got, running around, everything's big. You might look at it and say, okay, well, the philosophy of running and bumping into something, once again, back to collisions. So I'm always talking about collisions. Maybe if I make this character tiny, boom, that's easy, just tiny, done. And maybe I'm just going to really, in a really hacky way, just put a whole bunch more of these balls on the screen. How does that feel when the character's tiny, woo, and moving really quick? Okay, maybe half the balls need to be bad and half of them need to be good. Maybe this is not enough of them. Maybe I need millions of these things. So just duplicate it a ton more times. And Scratch is not going to have anywhere near the sort of flexibility that Unity or Unreal has. So there's going to be the equivalent in Unity and Unreal of doing this. It says spawn 1, spawn 10, which I can do in Scratch. Just I'm doing this really quickly to show if this feels more interesting. I'm running around getting stuff. That's kind of, oh, this is kind of fun. Quick, 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 hurry, hurry, hurry. That's more interesting than what I had before, where it's all big and readable. What if we make all of these beach balls really tiny? What if we had them different sizes? What if we have some that you can't get through? You bump into that and they don't move at all. They don't go away. They just conk, stop you from moving. So this is how you can iterate and iterate quickly. And you could, before you get into your Unity or Unreal, you could even get into more of a prototyping program. You could jump into a Scratch or a Construct or something else and prototype in there to get just the general idea of, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is how Flash used to be used in the day on bigger game team projects. You'd have an idea. Okay, what if the character runs here and does that and does that? Let's just prototype it in Flash, 2D, so that we can think about it and talk about it and iterate in a visual way. Because it's easier. Let me just share my screen again. It's easier for Tim and I to have a conversation about, okay, so you guys trying to get from here over to there. What would be interesting? That's a lot easier than him and I just getting there and without anything on the screen at all, just saying, hey, Tim, our guy's trying to go from A to B. What should he do? Having that visual stimulation, that visual talking point really helps, even if that's nothing like what the game's going to end up as,
Yeah.
even if that's the code is complete nonsense. Like I've just duplicated whatever 20 things. That's a terrible way of doing it. I should be spawning it and cloning it and removing the clones. So sometimes it's just quick, quick, quick to get those ideas coming along. And the whole talk today is about how to get started in game development. Get started by prototyping and iterating and messing around and just changing stuff and seeing what feels good and what's interesting. And at some point, if you say, I kind of had fun doing that myself, follow that path and do more of it. My dinosaur's tiny, maybe it's too tiny, make it a little bit bigger. Maybe the beach balls are too big. Maybe, the screen needs to be different. Maybe the background needs to change. Do what you can do and just bounce ideas.
Rick, what would you say to someone that's maybe, well, someone in the chat says that they've made the jam game, now they want to make the big game, but they've already rewritten stuff like 15 times already, and they're still nowhere. Like, what someone that continually rewrites their stuff, you see a way out of that loop?
Um, So there's a few rewriting stuff. Is that because players are saying this is no good, and we want to make it better, or is it because I'm looking at my code and saying, I don't think this code is so good? So, say you've got a game jam game, it's a platformer, and you're bouncing along. Oh, this is not too bad. I like it. And then if you show it to people, you ask them, what aspect of this do you like the most? What would you like to see changed? What bit doesn't work for you? You've got to get the feedback. And then when you get the feedback, people are saying, okay, I like the spikes. They're really cool. Jumping over the spikes is fun. So, okay, what is it about jumping over the spikes that is fun? Could it be that um, it's fun because it's tricky to do, like it's difficult? Ask them, get more information. So you might say, well, I don't know, I've got no one to ask. Well, our community. Hey, I've got this game. Can someone play it for a minute and give me some feedback? Ask in our community. Go to the forum. Go to our Discord channel. There's no excuse, right? So I want to make this really, really clear. It might be difficult to find some folks to team up with, or to have a conversation with, or to share with, but uh, there's an absolute path where you can do it. Go to the GameDev.tv Discord server, go to the channel where people are talking about these things, and say, I've got a little game. I could really use some feedback. Could anyone, do me a favor? That's it. That's as difficult as it needs to be. So get some feedback and then improve it and improve it and improve it. 15 rewrites, not a problem, so long as it's improving. And after 15 times, it should be getting better and better and better. And if people are liking it more and more and more and more, at some point you can say, okay, am I ready to do this as early access? Am I ready to put a demo out there? Am I ready to get it into people's hands? Am I ready to ask people how much you would pay for it? So, I don't know, 15 rewrites sounds good, so long as it's based upon player feedback.
Yeah, I mean, I got stuck in that loop the other day. Actually, I was messing around with character outlines for my game Battleborn, and I did exactly what you did. I got feedback. I posted something on Twitter, and I all the iterations that I was looking at, I labeled them 1, 2, 3, and 4,
Yep.
and then I just asked on Twitter, like, hey, what do you guys think? And I got a bunch of responses from people that just gave me feedback, and it's not that complicated to just ask for feedback. It's scary sometimes, but sometimes people will take you out of your own head and give you feedback. Sometimes their feedback will be completely different than you think it will be, and sometimes they'll be like, you know what, we really don't care, dude, like both purples look exactly the same. Just what are you focusing and why are you obsessing on this stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I'm going to show you just one other point of conversation topic, like a platform. Once again, in Scratch, just as quick for us to have a conversation about this. I'm not saying, of course, I'm in Scratch at the moment because I'm teaching it, but I'm a Unity guy, and recently I've been doing some stuff in Unreal, and the Quicksilver Bridge. Amazing, love it. But here, from a prototyping point of view, it's easy to talk about. I'm just going to full screen my thingy here so we can see it a little bit easier. So it's a platformer. Platformers are platformers are platformers. You've got a thing running along platforms, jumping. And then the conversation is, what more do we need to add? So even this simple moment, if we in our chat at the moment, what could we add to this that is within? So let me ask you this precisely. Uh, what could you personally add to what I've got on the screen here at the moment, where it's just a character jumping? If you jump on the spikes, boom, you go back to the start. That's it at the moment. I think if you fall, there's a death plane down there. You go back to the start. That's it. What could you add to this in your engine of choice, Unity, Unreal, Scratch, whatever, that you can currently do that could make this game a little bit better? What could you add to this? And if I was to answer the question first, I could add to this an enemy that floats along the top, that flies, in other words, just floats. And if the player bumped into it, then the player restarts as well. Like, because I've already added the mechanic of, if you hit the spikes, you restart. I could do that with a floating enemy. I could do that with little meteors that are dropping out of the sky, that as you see them coming in, you're like, oh, I have to dodge out of the way of that. So I can add other hazards. What about you, Tim? With if this was in Construct 3, which I know is your engine of power, of might, what could you add to this with your current skill set that could improve this experience?
Well, yeah, I went through 4 years of platformer design, so I've
Yeah,
learned quite a bit
I
about
know.
all
Well,
this stuff.
yeah, go easy on
But
us.
one of the things that I found that I really, really needed was kind of animation and game feel.
Yep.
So how it feels to go left and right, how it feels to jump, and actually jump arc was something that I obsessed over.
Mm,
So like you've got this kind of linear up and down jump right now.
yep.
One of the things I would do is I like jumps to start very fast
Mm,
and then kind of peak at the top and then fall with
right.
quick gravity. So that's probably what I would add.
Gotcha. Do you see anyone in chat who's answering the question in here? Can you have a look at that?
Pick up coins for score is one of them. Screen shake on death.
Yep.
Idle animation. Death counter. Oh, that's an easy one. Death counter would be cool. Construct 3 versus Unity. Unity can't hold up to Construct 3. That'd be unfair. You can't do that. Tear it apart, Tim. Tell him what's wrong with it. No, there's nothing. That's the thing is a game design. Someone brought up software design earlier, and like a game design is so much different than software design because software design, you have a use case, right? This software needs to take this spreadsheet and then export these leads, right? And you know what it needs to do ahead of time. So there's a very like clear, can this software do this thing? Yes or no?
Yep.
Games are way different because games are like, how does the player feel after they play your thing? And so there's no right answer on how you add stuff to it because like sometimes you add, like I made a platformer about a dude that goes to hell and he's fighting demons, right? But there's also platformers about fighting, I don't know, angels in heaven, I'm sure.
Mm,
And those two things feel very differently. My platformer doesn't have combat. There are a lot of platformers with combat, right? Not being able to fight something makes you feel powerless. Being able to fight something can make you feel powerful, right? So like there's there's no right way to do it. There's just like all of these different things of whatever the design goals are of the project and what you want to end up with. And I think a lot of people get stuck on, oh, I didn't do it right, I did it wrong, or I did it, it's inefficient, or it loops through this 30 times when it could have looped through it 5. But the player doesn't care about any of that. They
mm.
don't know that, right? It's just about making something cool and interesting for them.
Yep, I agree.
Draggy dude.
Draggy dude. I think you've got to make it. This is true with any craft, and game development is a craft. It's a skill. We're craftspeople working applying our trade, and I think let's compare it to say being a carpenter, a woodworker, making furniture or building kids' toys out of wood in your garage or shed. The Every day that you're out there, on the tools with your hand plane, making the wood beautiful, with your lacquer varnishing it or whatever it might be, every day you're working on it, you get better at making things. You make a chair and it's not very good and not very interesting. You make a second chair, oh, it's a little bit better. You make a third chair. Obviously you're not going to be making all these chairs to go around the dining table. You're like, oh, would you like to sit in my prototype chair? And then by the time you sit in the sixth chair, oh, this chair is amazing. But you make things over and over and over, and you get better and better, better at it. And you're like, oh, now I'm ready to take on, I don't know, a beautiful mirror frame. So you progress, and the starting projects you need to do. Maybe I'm just going to shave down a piece of wood so that it's smooth. Like that's it. That's my first project. And then after a certain amount of time, you work your way up to making that beautiful thing that you've always dreamed of making. Every day that you're not woodworking, you're not improving. You're not getting better at it. Exactly the same with game development. Every day that you're working on pushing yourself to improve, you do get better at it. Now, I think it's really important when you're starting out in game development that you don't get stuck on something that's too clever for too long. What I mean by too clever is you might get there and say, the little platformer we're looking at before, maybe you say, okay, I'm going to make my levels procedurally generated. That'd be awesome. I love it. Really important. If I'm going to launch my game, I need to have procedural levels because I don't want to go and make 1,000 levels. And you take on that. If you're not ready to take that on, if that's a bigger challenge than your skills currently afford, then you can potentially get stuck in doing that. And you could spend days, weeks, months just on this one particular part of the craft and not necessarily be building all the other fundamental skills that you need to build. You might go and get a solution that you've borrowed online somewhere that you don't fully understand. And if it breaks, you're not going to be able to fix it, improve it. So I think try to avoid taking on any of the big, crazy oh, this would be amazing type things, and just stick with the simple things for as long as you can in terms of how do I make the jump feel better? How do I add more enemies? How do I do something clever with the colors that change when you bump into something? How can I add a timer? So start with things that are more simple, and then after you've feel like you've really got on top of those things, then you can start to say, how do I make this procedurally generated?
The other part of that too is anything you haven't done, you have to expect that it takes 10, 20 times as long as you think it will. And
Mm,
procedural generation is one of those misleading things because everybody so many times they're like, "Oh, I don't want to make levels, so I'm just going to make them procedurally generated." What they don't realize is that procedurally generating levels takes way more game design and level design knowledge than designing levels does. Because now do you not only have to design levels, but you have to write code to tell a machine how to design levels. And making procedural generated levels is not hard. Making good procedural generated levels is very hard. It's very complex, right? Getting the levels good and interesting, because so many times people confuse procedural generation with random generation, and they're like they just randomize the grid and it looks horrible, and like there's a bunch of space and the enemy is like 30 feet that way, and it's like, why am I walking around? It doesn't make any sense. So like it's misleading because you can get it running quickly, but getting it working good takes a long time. And I think like a lot of people, they misunderstand that stuff. They think, oh, if you can just get it running, then it's fine. But hand making levels, for example, is actually, even though misleadingly it seems like it would be the long path, it's actually the short path, right?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but it's got a different use case.
So
Um,
a good question just popped up from Giggletail. How do you suggest approaching starting on a project if you have more ideas, interest when it comes to crafting worlds, levels, and narrative than you do than want the gameplay to look like? Um, play to your strengths. Absolutely play to your strengths. Do what you feel good about. Minecraft, great example. You know, Notch was a great programmer, not such a great artist, just made some basic art. And that art ended up being, you know, exactly what the game needed. Perfect. There's other people out there who are amazing pixel artists, but not so good at coding. They make a game that's just really, really art heavy. So, you know, level designers out there as well. One way that you can get started doing this is go, if we'll use Unity as an example. I'm not as familiar with if Unreal has this, but or what it has, sorry, but go to the Unity asset store and find a template starter kit that is in the genre you're looking to do. So we've recently completed creating a 2D RPG template starter kit. It was in one of the humble bundles that we're in. We're going to be launching it on the Unity asset store pretty soon, so that you can go and just grab it, and the fundamentals are there already. Your character moves, you can load into the next scene. When you run to the left, there's an enemy you can hit in the head and do damage to. So all of that fundamental stuff is already in there. You should understand how it works. And the cool thing about this template starter kit is that we have videos explaining all of the stuff that's going on. So you're not looking at the code saying, what the heck's happening? We're actually explaining it to you, how it works, which I think is really cool, and different to a lot of template starter kitty things that I've looked at. But then if you're really interested in narrative and character design, then boom, you've got it right there. You can focus on, okay, I need a different character that's going to say this stuff, and the story and the quests and fitting it all together, and you're not spending your time saying, how do I make movement look good? So I think, and likewise, if you're not an artist and you don't have an interest in that, then spend a little bit of money and buy some visual asset packs, and then go make all of the programming yourself. Go actually make the gameplay, but use art that someone else has created. Sound effects and audio, it's obvious you can get a whole bunch of that off the shelf for not much money and just plug it into your game. So when you're starting out, play to your strengths and the things you like to do, and everything else just outsource it. In other words, just use an engine that starts with it already. Get asset kits, asset packs for it, and don't try to do all that yourself.
Yeah, 100%. You know, a lot of like if you look at a lot of strategy games actually, the strategy games usually look there's some good looking strategy games, but a lot of like the super simulation heavy strategy games, they don't look that great. And that's because like they're so system heavy that most of the developers are like, we're not going to put a bunch of work into art. We're going to put all the work into the system heavy stuff. And like people forgive that because the system stuff is so good, right? They really played to their strengths there. And obviously you always want your game to look visually, aesthetically pleasing, but there are a lot of cases where playing to your strengths is a way better option than trying to even out your weaknesses, right? Because it'll take a lot longer to do that, and it doesn't always have the same effect as just hiring somebody that their strength is your weakness, right? A lot of times that's the better outcome.
Yeah.
uh, can take risks, as you can't mitigate the risk of people not connecting with your game, but you can get player feedback. Have you tried recorded player sessions? That's another really good point, actually. I think a lot of people, like, how to get feedback is a really important point on how to submit, or how to finish games, and how to like actually make better games. So a lot of people will be like, they'll send their game to somebody and they'll say, what did you think of this yellow enemy, or like, was it good, or was it fun? Or they ask questions like that. But really, the best feedback comes from actually watching someone play your game. So, in-person events were really good at this. If you get your game showcase there, you could just sit there and watch people play it. But the next best thing is what Contiguous Games suggested, which is having people play your game but record their session for you. And bonus points if you can get them to record their thoughts via voice, and just kind of what they're thinking. Because then you can watch that video and you could say, oh, you know what? While they would have said, yes, the game is fun, it's very clear that when they interacted with the enemy, they thought it was a power up or something, right? And then you like, oh, the enemy doesn't look weird. Maybe because it's not red. Maybe I should make it red. And then suddenly they're like, oh, they get it's an enemy now. So they do different things in the game.
Yep.
And yeah, there's so many things you can gather from stuff like that too. So
Got it.
getting feedback is super important, but how you get feedback is extra important.
Yeah. Got a question from AR. Is it a good strategy to first improve by making very unoriginal games and only later try something new original? So it's interesting the way you frame that unoriginal versus original. Um, it's there's a for me, games are a grouping of mechanics and a grouping of moments. And most of those mechanics have been seen somewhere before. So if you've got player movement, well, player movement is everywhere. If you've got killing enemies, killing enemies has been done everywhere. Tim, you and I did a YouTube video on Ape Out, I think it was, where you run around as a gorilla and you're smashing them against the wall. It's like really original, but when you look at it, you think about it, it's like, well, it's not really. You've got a player who has melee attacks, and when you come up against an enemy, you throw them against a wall. Like, that is not innovative. It's just been executed in an interesting way that has a theme to it. And by adding that theme, that's when you get the originality, I think. So I don't think so. The question's more specifically, is it a good strategy to make unoriginal games? So the answer to that in a blunt way is yes. And I wouldn't see them as unoriginal games. I'd see them as genre games. And so I don't like the word clone. Like, if someone says, I'm going to clone a game, like, oh, don't do that. Because the word clone means copy, steal, rip off. So I'm going to make a Flappy Bird clone. Well, don't do that. And don't ever try to publish your Flappy Bird clone and pass it off as, here's a cool game. Because people get really upset about it. That you haven't been original. You've just, taken something that's been done a million times and throwing it out there. It's good to learn from, absolutely. And you're following a tutorial, learn from it. But then your goal is to make it different so it's unrecognizable as what you've just done. And it's as easy as going, instead of flapping along like that, we're going to flip it and you're going to go up like that. Now, there's a whole bunch of games where you go, jump up, and a whole bunch of games where you jump down. So that in and of itself is not necessarily original. But think of a way to change the game that you're working on with a couple of minor tweaks, make things big, make things small. So yes, look for mechanics that have been done before, the genre that I was saying before. So a platformer is a genre. There's a million platformers out there. If you make it, you might feel like it's unoriginal, but you can tweak it and put your own theme to it and flavor to it so that it feels different and interesting. Maybe you put dial screen shake up to 15. Like, if you play Broforce, one of my favorite platformers, they're like, okay, everything explodes and everything shakes and destruction. And so they've taken a genre and added their own little bits of flavor to it. It might be a top-down scrolling, or side scrolling, or top scrolling shooter game, like a 2D button masher. What is a shmup? Like a bullet hell kind of game. Take one of those. That's a genre. So having the mechanics, things flying down, I'm shooting it. I get upgrades, more bullets spawning. Like nothing about that is never seen before, but you can put your own flavor to it. You know, why is your ship different? Why are the enemies interesting? What's going on with the bullets? And I think Ikaruga, it's an old game now, but Ikaruga, when it came out, took okay, I'm a shoot 'em up, just plenty of bullets going on. And they have the mechanic where bullets are either, I think it's black and white, but they're two colors. So they're either black, and if they're black, you need to flip your ship. I forget now whether you need to be black or you need to be white, but they won't hurt you if you're a certain color. So you can flip between two colors and all the bullets are two colors. That's all they did. That's all they added to make that game totally different, unique, interesting, amazing, original. But everything else was just, you know, genre best practice. Just, you know, move and shoot.
Yeah, on that, the way I look at it too is broken up in two different sections: design and development. And I think generally development is the easier part to learn, the technical, how to actually make stuff work, versus design, which is very abstract and sometimes opinion based and weird. So designing a game from scratch is different than developing a game from scratch. And so generally exactly what you said, Rick, is I think starting with something that exists already and kind of making it, developing it, I think is a better way to go to get your hands dirty on development stuff. And then once you learn development stuff, it makes sense to kind of jump into game design and tweaking and making it interesting.
Yep. Yeah, cool.
Um,
The
Chris
other
says, I
thing,
think copying is a good way of learning. You can always put your own spin on a classic concept. Yeah, I
yep.
agree.
Yeah. Absolutely. So start by copying, or start by following tutorials. You know, this is the way we do things in our courses as well. So if you're completely new, like where do I start? What do I do? Come take one of our courses. Say if you're interested in Unity, come take our Unity 2D course. Make some 2D games. And as you're going along, you're not able to do stuff yet. So just follow what we're doing and tweak a few things here and there. You know, make it faster, make it slower, tweak stuff as we've talked about. And so work through that section one and then section two, section three. At some point, you're going to feel like, you know what? I'm getting the swing of this. I'm feeling like I could make something. I've got some ideas. There's a game jam coming up. It's a weekend game jam or a 1 week game jam. I'm going to take the couple of mechanics. So that's the this thing moves or that thing explodes or that thing bumps or there's a collision. A couple of those mechanics and make a little bit of a different game and just do it for the game jam. Maybe no one plays it. Maybe no one sees it. That's not the point. I started it. It was my idea. I took things I already knew that I'd learned and I finished it. And from that, I got a little bit of player feedback and I got that sense of reward of, I've made a game. And it might not be a good game, but I made a game. I started it, I finished it. It was me. Yes, all of my knowledge and the mechanics came from courses I've been through, but that's how you learn in life. You don't learn by going out into your backyard and just, it gets like beamed into your head. You learn by reading and watching and following people who've done it before. That's how you learn. That's how you come up with original ideas, is by absorbing all the knowledge of the stuff people have done before. And so then you're on this journey. You've gone through a few sections of a course. You've done a game jam. Maybe you're ready to go to more advanced learning. Maybe you've got areas of interest that are starting to emerge out of that, and you can spend more time on, maybe now it is time to learn procedural generation, or within our particular flow in Unity, maybe you go to the multiplayer course or our mobile course or our RPG course. And so you advance in that way. And every now and again, you come up for air from the course and you make a game jam game. After you do that for a while and you're like, okay, I've made a couple of game jam games. This is feeling pretty good. Then you can start to say, I'm ready to make a game and put it out on Steam or on the App Store or, a proper itch.io type game. And you're ready for that. And you say, I'm going to make a game that will be, I don't know, take me a few months to make. It's going to be really simple. Still building upon these mechanics and these ideas that I've been playing around with in my game jam. Don't make the big thing. Don't go do something different. If you've been experimenting with making racing car games, don't go off and make an RTS. Continue to make some racing car games. Stick in an area that you're getting more familiar with and that you enjoy doing and you want to get better at. And this is one of those things that I really like, Tim, is when people stay in the same genre of game. If you're making platformers, continue to make platformers until you make an amazing platformer that does well. If you're making racing games, continue to do that until it does really well. resist the temptation to go off and do every last little genre. Okay, I made one platformer. Now I'm going to make a racing game. Now I'm going to make an RPG. Now I'm going to make an RTS. That's good from a learning point of view, but in terms of making your own games, try to stick in the one genre if you can. Get really good at it, and then you're ready to release something. Release something small. It's not going to do well. It's not going to sell a million copies, but you're getting a lot of feedback. You're going to practice your marketing a little bit, and you're going to go through that journey. And then if you think, you know what, I'm ready to be really serious about this, then you can take on the project that might take 6 months or a year and make something that's going to be polished and going to be tuned and going to have unique elements to it and going to have that kind of pizzazz, going to have some remarkability, and then you're ready to go into that next phase. That's not so much a beginning conversation. That's more a how do you go from being amateur to professional that we're not talking so much about today, but hopefully that framework of how you learn and go from beginner and get to that intermediate and advanced stage. Hopefully that makes sense. There's a long rant for you.
Yeah, I'd be interested in the chat if anybody wanted to kind of say what their goal is. Do they want to make games as a hobby, or do they want to make games as a business, or kind of what they want to do, like commercial games or just hobby games, or where they're at in that kind of journey? Because starting is one conversation, right? But finishing is very different, kind of depending what you want out of the thing. Because if you want to launch a game commercially on Steam and Xbox, that's a very different process than like wanting to just have people play your stuff. Because then you could throw it on itch, or you could throw it on wherever, and not really worry too much about it. But it's, yeah, I think, yeah, I'm getting distracted by chat.
Yeah, me too.
Sorry.
Me too. But yeah, there's a little bit of conversation. You know what? Don't don't take on something when you go from, okay, I'm kind of learning, I've made a game or two, now I'm going to make my proper game. Don't take on something that you've got no idea how you're going to make it. Like, I know that sounds courageous to do that, or it sounds like you're going to learn a lot, but I highly recommend taking on something when you say, I'm going to make a proper game, take on something you know how to do. So that would
Yeah.
be, if you've not dabbled in multiplayer, don't go and do a multiplayer game. It's going to take, a lot of time, and I think it's going to slow down your learning. And don't take on a massive project. Take on something that, okay, I've made some space shooters. I'm going to make an even better space shooter, and do that a couple of times to get a feel for how it works.
I think it'll teach you a lot. There's so many subtleties to even sticking to the same genre that you'll learn over time.
Yeah.
Looks like we got a lot of commercial people in here. A few hobby people that want to join a game studio. Okay.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people who, you take a couple of courses and you kind of get into it. I think as a hobbyist, you're saying, I'm not yet ready to be reliant upon my game to be a commercial success in order to be able to pay the bills. And I think that's smart to not rely upon your game. I think it's really smart to not rely upon your game until it actually does start to make money. But, obviously it's hard to
Yeah.
have a day job and to be working on your game. We were talking with Todd a few weeks ago. Um, Falling Frontier. I always mess up whether it's Falling or Fallen. I think it's Falling Frontier that he's working on. He's been working on that in a team for a few years and then on his own for another few years. It's been a long, long, long labor of love. And so he was at the start doing it while also having the day job. But for the last, I don't know, Tim, if you remember, last couple of years, he's been out there. This is it. This is his thing. And he's in a situation where he was saying that his partner works, and she's keeping the ship afloat while he's working on the thing that he's like, this is the long term play. So if you have a system like that, that can work. If it's just you and you've got a certain amount of money in the bank, you say you've got, oh, yeah, I can survive for 5 months, right? So at the end of 5 months, my game then starts to need to be bringing in the amount of money to, buy food and pay the rent. If you haven't already launched a commercial game, the chances of that is very low. It's not a very good business model to do that, to be reliant upon my game has to make money or else I'm in trouble. That's not a good way of doing it. There's other industries where I'd say that's amazing. Say, for example, you're into or you get roped into network marketing, for example. And I got roped into network marketing for a little while, so I understand it pretty well. I really wanted to study it and see what it's all about. Network marketing, basically, you've got a product and then you go and sell, or you sign up other people to consume that product and sell the product, and then they sign up people and they sign up people. So you have this team, you have a network, and the more people you bring into that, the more money you make. It's really, really hard, and you need to speak to 100 people to get one person who says yes. So in that instance, I would say to you, just go do more, push yourself, and set yourself some sort of scary limit. If I don't sign up a certain number of people in 2 months, I'm I'm living under a bridge. It's like go, 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 go. Because that motivation can lead to action, and that action can lead to results. I don't think the same can be said in a creative technology field where there's no predictability. In network marketing, you pick up the phone 100 times, you're going to get better, and eventually you're going to get people saying yes, so long as you got the right product and all that kind of stuff. You're going to lose a lot of friends along the way. So if anyone, yeah, so I'm not such a big fan of it because you have to be constantly selling and hustling. But if you choose that, you can. But if I was to say to you, okay, go make a game, you got 3 months. At the end of the 3 months, if it doesn't do well, then repossessing your car and you've got to move under a bridge. Okay, go, 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 go. It's not going to help you. That's not going to get you the hustle you need to succeed. You need to have the space, the freedom, the time. You need to start and fail. You need to explore. You need to try a game. It's not going to work. Another one, it's not going to work. You need to have a way of sustaining that. This is my point in all of this, sustaining that over a longer amount of time where you're not relying upon your game having to make money in order for you to continue being able to do game development.
100%. I think I so many people put just unnecessary pressure on themselves too. And I think one thing is that financial pressure that can be completely crippling, but the other part of that is the the just you don't know, and you mentioned Todd. The thing about Todd doing this, even though it was his first game, even though it's very risky for him to be doing this, he has indicators of success with his wish list, right? So he knows he's going to make X amount of dollars with the amount of
Yeah.
wish list that he has on Steam.
Mm.
So there's some proof there that's giving him some kind of push forward. A lot of times
once
in game dev, you
once you
don't
get to
know.
that stage, once you get to the
Right.
stage, or like that was probably years before he got to having a demo or visuals where people are like, I want to wish list that. So, would you recommend, Tim, that people? I know we talked about this in our marketing workshop recently. If people are working on a game that they think could go onto Steam, at what point do you think someone should get that onto Steam, and and getting that indication of wish list, because wish lists are going to indicate sales? How early?
I think as early as possible. I even would say that like if you've got visual mock-ups of what you think a game should look like, even if it's not working, I think putting up a Steam page is important because Steam has 90 million monthly users and they send you a lot of traffic. And even though your game doesn't have a trailer or anything like that, having a Steam page up there might actually um, get people to wish list it. And it can also be a good indication of how interested people actually are. They give you metrics like click through, and they give you metrics like, wish lists and all that stuff. And any kind of metrics is good when you're talking about a commercial game, but especially if you plan on being commercial in the future, or you want to learn, or you want to publish games and make money, getting that stuff up early as possible and front loading all that learning, because there's a bunch of learning to do on Steam too. Trust me, it's a very confusing platform on the back end, and there's a lot of stuff you got to learn, and publishing games and all that stuff too. So getting all that learning out of the way is important, and it's $100. Pay your $100, go do the thing, put up your Steam page as soon as possible, because then you can start gauging wish lists, and you can update it as time goes on and kind of see the difference between, oh, when I had those graphics I only got 10 wish lists a day, but now I get 30 because of these
Yeah.
graphics. So you can know that you're running in the right direction, basically.
You know what, Tim? I think something that a lot of people are not ready for when they're going from just learning about game development to starting to make their own games. They're not ready for the fact that you need to stay in one lane on the highway for a long time, and that can get really boring. So, for
Yeah.
example, you get there and say, "I'm going to make a I don't know, I'm going to make a first person shooter." You have to be making that one particular first person shooter for a significant amount of time. It might be 6 months, it might be 6 years. Hopefully, it's not 6 years. And you have to stay in that lane, and you have to resist getting off the highway. You have to resist changing lanes. You have to resist
Yeah.
slowing down. You have to resist going and buying a new car because I don't know if I like this car anymore. that part of the metaphor is changing engine, or changing direction completely. So you have to stay doing that. I think it's good for us to tell you folks about that, just so you're ready for it, and okay, once I start down this path, I can be ready to commit. And what I want you to hear out of this is, at some point you will hate it. You'll be like, my game sucks. I don't want to work on this anymore. This is boring. I want to go do something cool and new, because there's an excitement in starting a new thing. There's an excitement in prototyping. There's an excitement in creative discovery that you don't get after a while, when you're just going to go from my game is ideas and I've prototyped it and I'm working on it now. I need to make level 2 and level 5 and level 10 and enemy number 2 and 5 and 10. And I'm going to polish it. I'm going to find bug number 5 and 10 and 100 and 1,000. So just be ready for that. And if you need a creative outlet, if you're wandering, then spend a weekend, do a game jam, go do something really crazy, zany, wacky, and then come back to your main project.
Yeah, that's a huge concern. And it's something we talked about, like beginners versus pros. That is a very pro mindset of looking at a project and asking, do you want to dedicate the next 2 years of your life to this? Like, not just will it make money, not just like will it be successful, but like, yo, do I really want to dedicate 2 years of my life to get this finished? I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day about a project I worked on before, and it was, do I think the project would be financially successful? Yeah, but like, do I want to dedicate my time to that and like all of my creative energy for the next few years? No, not really. So that's a really important consideration, that I think a lot of people really underestimate quite a bit, because it takes so much time. And not only that, but there's so many little things that come up in that, where you don't want to do that. Your project can get messier too. Like, in order to fix bug number 137, sometimes you have to make that code a little worse in a
Yeah.
weird way, just to like, patch stuff up. And then you do that a few times, and now you're like, oh, this whole thing's getting messy, and it's getting bigger, and it's harder to work on, and it's harder to, it used to be really quick to just tweak 3 little things, but now it takes a little bit longer because there's like all these source files everywhere. So it's just an exponential amount of work in the same lane, in the same genre, going the same speed for a very long time. And it's something that you really need to consider when you're working on your projects and stuff too, you know?
Is Yeah, last couple of questions and we'll wrap it up. Is learning multiple softwares better than being focused on a single software, e.g., Blender versus 3D Studio Max versus Maya and Blender? So, uh, well, okay. When it comes to learning 3D software, just learn one. There's zero need to learn Blender and Maya and 3D Studio Max. Just learn one. Like, just learn Blender, for example. You can get everything done in Blender you need to get done. It's not like you're saying, okay, Blender can do modeling well, but Maya can do animation well. Blender can do it all. So that's what I would say in terms of that. When it comes to engines, same thing. Pick one and stay with it. If you're like, oh, I'm not sure about Unity versus Unreal, which one should I do, Tim? Take 2 weeks to learn the fundamentals of Unity. Take 2 weeks to learn the fundamental of Unreal. Take one of our courses that take you through this stuff, and at the end of the 2 weeks on each, then get there and say, okay, which one did I like more? Which one felt good? And then pick it and stay with it. And it's going to be a great decision. You can make everything in either of the engines. They have their pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses, but pick one, stick with it, stay with it, learn it, learn it, learn it, get really, really, really good at it. If you stay in one engine for a year or 2 or 3, it's really easy to jump to other engines in the future. Things relate. There's a lot of similarities. If you're learning C sharp, then a lot of the fundamentals are the same in C++ and vice versa. So I really recommend sticking with one particular thing and just running with it. There's no need to bounce around. Personal opinion.
Yeah, you won't. I mean, there might be some advantages if you're planning on getting a job somewhere, and the studio uses 3ds Max or whatever. But like most of the time, it's really about the thing you produce, not the software you use, especially these days. So yeah, stick with what you know and what you learn. If what you know can do the thing, there's no reason to learning something else.
Um, Alan asking if a VR course is coming soon. Maybe if you guys are interested in it. Yeah, I did put a poll on Facebook. Just we're interested to see how many people have VR headsets. So we made VR courses a few years ago, and at the time, the Oculus Rift 2. Have I got that right for a change? I always mess it up. I'm looking at one up there in the cupboard, but I use it so rarely, it makes me dizzy. Uh, so the Quest 2, not Rift 2, sorry, Quest 2. Um, I do get that wrong every time. Uh, so it's become more prolific, I think, as a piece of hardware out there in the world. So if more game developers have VR equipment, then we'll make VR courses. But if there's only a handful of people who do, then it's not enough people interested in it. So let us know. We're always happy to make courses people are excited about. So thank you for the question on that, Alan. Um, okay, last question. Okay, Tim, for you, um, what do you wish you knew when you started very first learning game development? Not sort of tinkering as a kid, making some levels here and there and level editors, but when you're like, I'm gonna learn, I'm gonna code up a thing, I'm gonna make a thing, I'm gonna build it myself. What do you wish you knew at that point that you hop in a time machine, you go back, you tell yourself is probably going to say like, go away, I don't believe you. But now you're like, oh yeah, that guy who came and told me that thing in the time machine, I should have listened to him. What would that have been?
I wish I would have known that launching my first game would be the hardest thing I had ever done in my entire life. Like by far. Like just the hardest in so many aspects, in technology, in motivation, in like willpower, in discipline, in everything. It was one of the hardest things that I ever did. Um, I think it's getting easier. It definitely gets easier after you've done it once. But well, you know what? Looking back, if I would have known it was that hard, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I did do it, and it's exciting now because I feel like now that I've gotten that under my belt, everything else actually has this weird like it's not as complicated now because I've done a really hard thing. You know what I mean? And so everything else just seems like, oh yeah, I could do that. It's easy. Like so, I think doing that hard thing, getting under your belt, is actually super important. And I think a lot of people are unprepared for just how hard and complicated game dev can be. And I think that's why we get a lot of people that don't start or don't finish because it can just be overwhelming. Like not even just from the technical aspect, but from the motivational aspect and from the feedback aspect and the interpersonal aspect and the marketing aspect and the all that stuff. There's so many different things into it, and not only that, but when you're making a game alone, remember that you are programming, sound, music, art, UX, UI. You are all the things. So it's all these different disciplines on top of each other, plus the motivation to keep going, plus the perseverance, plus the just skill sets. But on top of that, you have to be out of your. There's no way you're going to be comfortable with all those things, right? So some of those things are going to be way out of your comfort zone, right? And like marketing is usually the thing that's like way out of everybody's comfort zone in game dev. So it's like you've got to do a thing that you're completely uncomfortable with and you know nothing about, and you have to learn it all and you have to do it all and you have to be there. And I know I sound like I'm trying to discourage people from game dev. Trust me, it's amazing. It's one of the most amazing things that I've ever done. But it's also been one of the hardest. And I think those two things usually go together, right? Like I don't think you can really have these transcendent, amazing experiences without them also being in some way life altering, and really hard and complicated. Because if it's easy, it's like it doesn't affect you that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard. It's hard, and just be prepared for that. But if you are prepared for it, I think you can make better decisions. Like for example, when you're like, oh, I'm really into this game, I want to put 16 hours into it today and just nonstop and obsess about it. You can know that like, hey, I need this kind of motivation a year and a half from now. So maybe instead of 16 hours now, I should do 6 hours now because then I can keep that momentum going for a longer period of time versus, just going
Yeah.
up like this and then just burning out.
I think as well, something that a lot of people don't realize is there's a spectrum of making games. And if I compare this to making food, for example, uh, you can own a bakery and be very successful. You can own a fine dining restaurant and be very successful. You can, as someone learning to cook or be a chef, you can make cookies or muffins, and it's fairly straightforward. Couple of ingredients, mix it up, add some things. Oh, maybe I'll add some chocolate. There we go. That's a cookie. Give it to people. Do you like it? Yes or no? Needs more whatever, more sugar, less sugar, more something, more things in it. So you just work on that, and cookie or muffin, there's not a lot of complexity to the whole process, but there's a real craft in getting that, what's the temperature of the oven and how long do you cook it for. So
Right.
you can be very narrow and focus on something that's one product, but you can sell muffins and make a lot of money and be very successful and have people be like, wow, you're the greatest thing ever. And if you follow that along in the cooking culinary journey, all the way up to, okay, opening your own restaurant, tons of money to do that, having a team of whatever 10 chefs and 20 wait staff, making 7-course dishes, having a menu that has the finest stuff on it. You might need to go off to cooking school, whatever, culinary school, chef school. You might need to do 10 years working in top restaurants to serve your apprenticeship, getting screamed at by the Gordon Ramsays of the world. You might need to understand how this cuisine works and that cuisine. You need to understand, that sort of meat, this sort of, how to cook chicken versus venison, how to do vegetarian dishes, vegan, gluten free, like all this stuff over here compared with making muffins, they're two different journeys. And I think this is what a lot of people think game development is. They think making games is. They look at AAA games, they look at big successful games, they look at games that have big worlds, No Man's Sky, it's got all this stuff and I need to aspire to that. Games that have had teams of 10 or 20 or 50 or 1,000 people work on it. And that's what game development is. However, what I really want you to know is game development can be all the way down the other end of the spectrum. It can be perfect the art of making the perfect muffin. Don't worry about all the other stuff. Muffins generally don't have meat in it. So don't need to worry about that. You don't need to learn that. Muffins generally don't need to be paired with wine. So, so all you need to do is just focus on muffins and you can be successful. Focus on interesting games that have one or two small mechanics in them that are real joy to play, that's 5 hours, that you're selling for $10, that can have great success without having multiplayer and procedural generation and 100 worlds and 50 characters you select from, etc., etc., etc. So just wanted to paint that picture that game development can be small and focused and quick. It doesn't have to be gigantic. Crossy Road, as I mentioned before, is an excellent example of a game that can succeed, can be fun to play, can be interesting, can have some innovation, but still based upon, famous old retro games. And so follow that path is my recommendation if you're a solo indie developer in the beginning stages of your journey. Make muffins, not having gourmet 5-star French restaurants.
100%. Had I known that there was a choice there, I might have made a different choice because I absolutely did start and try to immediately go for the 5-star restaurant of things I wanted to make, and I skipped everything in between. And because of that, there was a long learning journey there. But you can totally start with muffins and then make cakes and then make, and work your way up to that stuff. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. You can totally stop at muffins too. You can just stick to muffins, just
Yeah.
make some cool muffins. And there's nothing wrong with that.
You know what often happens is you're making muffins and then you partner up with someone and you say, okay, instead of just making muffins, let's make, all sort of baked goods. And so that's your progression. That, our game's going to be a little bit bigger. We will include multiplayer in our, simple platformer. So I think you can expand as you team up with other people, or as you get better at it, you get quicker. Yeah. Awesome.
100%.
Cool, man. Well, I think that's good for today. Thanks
been
everyone
an
for hanging out
in-depth,
with us, for all the
crazy
spectacularly good
list.
questions. If you've enjoyed this a little bit, please chuck the thumbs up. I know everyone asks that on every video and live stream ever, but it does help out, I think, maybe.
Smash that like button.
Smash the like button. And next week, Tim, what have we got for our regular proceedings of livecast? Next week we've got...
So next week we've got a special guest, Vimlark, the king of game jams, is going to join us for his top tips on how to enter a game jam and how to get finished and how to complete a game jam and all that good stuff. So we're really excited for that. And we're excited to have Vimlark here with us. It's going to be awesome.
Yes. And if you haven't signed up for the Game Jam yet, come join. Tim, maybe we can throw a link in the thingamajiggy. So come join our Game Jam. It's starting on the 20th of May and it's running until the 30th of May. Hopefully, I've got those dates correct. And if it's your first Game Jam, fantastic. I'm going to be making a fun little hokey game with my daughter. So low expectations on how that's going to end up. We're just going to do whatever and have a bit of fun. So you don't need to be doing anything spectacular. You can just make your first game. It's going to be great.
It's
So come
designed
join
around
for
that too. It's 10 days long, right? It's going to give you all the time. And we're going to be doing lots of live streams during the Game Jam too to keep everybody motivated, keep everybody interested, answer questions if anybody has any. So we're really taking it seriously this year, which is cool.
Wicked. Hey, Tim, thanks for hanging out. Always lovely chatting with you.
Thank you, Rick. It's been fun.
And to our folks here live, thank you for joining us. And we will see you guys all next time.
Bye, everybody.
Oh,
We're going to
and we need to
pause.
talk. We need to talk for a little bit
No,
because when I
just
push
wave
the end
silently.
stream button,
Just
I don't know technology, Tim. I don't know how these things work. Why you put end stream and then it kind of chops it off way back there. So we seem to. You can
we
just.
got to find a better alternative
You
to
know what?
this
This is
than
where the
just
credits come
awkwardly
across the screen,
holding on the
and we're kind of,
conversation
the hosts of the show are
until
kind
it
of like
goes.
pretending to talk. Oh, what did you do on the weekend? Oh, pretty good. And the credits are scrolling. So at some point, it's just going to end. It's probably ended before this bit. So I'm going to kill the stream now. Thanks very much. Catch you all later.